I know I'm meant to talk to people about Jesus, but I don't really know who that would be. Actually have non-Christians to share the gospel with. It's not rocket science, really. It's like if they're not in your life, you probably can't share Jesus. Talking to people about Jesus can feel weird, but what if you're overthinking it? You're listening to the Life on Mission podcast, where we explore what it means to share your faith and how to build your confidence talking to people about Jesus. Okay, hey guys, welcome to the Life on Mission podcast. My name is Tim, and as always, I'm here with Mark.
What's going on, Tim? How's it going?
I'm having a good day today.
I missed you.
You've missed me.
Oh, mate, I really did.
It's been a long week, hasn't it?
I know, it has. It's been a good week, but a fairly long week.
And it's still raining where we are, which is a little bit sad.
And we live on the sunny coast, which is hilarious.
Yeah, the place, for those of you who are abroad, we live in a place called
We technically live on it also.
We live on it.
Yeah.
It's called the Sunshine Coast. But I think in the last couple of years, whenever my family has visited, it's always been raining. And so they're really questioning.
Are you lying, basically?
Yeah, or our founding fathers of the Sunshine Coast. Were they just...
We're talking about the founding fathers of the Sunshine Coast. Tangential or what?
That's right. That's the first tangent.
Right.
So let's get back on track. The Life on Mission podcast. What are we about, Mark?
Oh, mate, I'll tell you what we're about. We love Jesus and we want other people to love Jesus as well. But how do you... share Jesus without coming across like maybe some of the people we've encountered in the past who look at you for way too long in the eye and say, do you know Jesus is your Lord and Saviour? That's right. And you're just like, dude, I feel like I'm turning to stone. Please stop.
I already follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's right. How can we just be normal? But let's address the fact that as simple as it maybe theoretically should be, it can just be weird.
Yeah.
And complicated.
It can.
And so today, we have been talking through 3 words which sort of overview how we can approach sharing Jesus.
What are those words, Tim?
So 3 words are pray, connect, respond. So pray is the idea of you and Jesus. So first of all, if we're going to share about Jesus, we need to have a vibrant relationship with him ourselves. Second word is connect. And do you have actual friends who aren't actually following Jesus? Because if you're going to share Jesus with people, you need to know people who don't know Jesus.
That would help. Yeah.
That would really help. And then the third word is respond, which is the Holy Spirit's already at work. And so let's just get on board with what he's already doing. Let's listen to his voice and respond to that and let him lead this whole thing.
Mm.
So today we are looking at diving in on connect.
Right.
How do we build relationships outside of the church? And we actually have some great questions that have come in on our yesHEis socials, which are just going to drive a great conversation about this. So first question, I know I'm meant to talk to people about Jesus, but I don't really know who that would be. Question mark.
That's a great question.
But yeah, I think that's a classic question. It's just like, for me, myself, I just find myself sometimes in a bit of a bubble. And so like, who are we meant to, I can't go on a mission trip.
Right.
You
almost find yourself being aware of the fact that most people, you go to a coffee shop and you're like, statistically speaking, most of these people are probably unsaved. So do I just start talking to strangers?
Yeah.
How do I do that? But what if I'm an introvert? Like, who even does that? The preachers on the street corners. Is that what we do?
Yeah.
Do we just go to the busiest place?
Yeah. Yeah. Which sometimes works.
Yeah.
To be honest, that can work. But I think for I don't know. I don't want to speak for the average person. Who's the average person? I was going to say the average person maybe just isn't that kind of person.
Mm.
That takes a bit of confidence and yeah. Anyway, I think it's really interesting. To that point, Jesus says, "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth."
Yeah.
And I think in a way that's almost like a proximity concentric, the levels of concentric circles. So Jerusalem being, your closest proximity people, through to just the ends of the earth, which may be like the missions trip or standing on the street corner. But I think one way to interpret that could be just like, hey, start with the people around you. And even Peter, started with the Jews.
Yeah.
That was, the Jews were the initial, they were his people.
Yeah.
And then, the Holy Spirit said, no, well, it's open to the Gentiles now. And so I think that idea of just like starting with your natural connections. So in the cafe scenario, it might be like, well, I always go to this cafe.
Great,
I always order coffee from
Yeah.
this same person. Why don't I just strike up a friendship with them? I mean, for me, my next door, like I think of my neighbors, and I actually last year started praying for the 5 houses around me, like my next door neighbors on my side of the street,
Yeah.
and then the neighbor who's directly across, and then his 2.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm just
right.
like, well, that's like just that
Great.
little,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the center of that hub.
Yeah.
And so it was a bit of a funny story because Russell next door, he would be around 60, and he's been like a concreter his whole life.
Right.
And so his lower back and his knees are just like killing.
Okay. Yeah.
And he tells me about it all the time, interlaced with F words.
Okay. Yeah.
And I often pray for him, but I had the thought one day, well, I haven't actually prayed with him.
Right.
And so I was like, well, we talk all the time. It's weird. We just take stuff out to the bin at the same time.
Yeah.
And so we struck up a friendship. And so I just I offered to pray for him one day. I'm like, hey, like, I'm a Christian and, I follow Jesus. And, hey, do you mind if I just pray for you back? He said no.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
He
And now you've moved.
Now we've moved. But I honestly, part of me cared, but then part of me didn't care because I'm like, well, we're still his neighbors.
Yeah.
I still see him again tomorrow. So I don't have to be embarrassed about that. I can just continue the relationship and continue, building that connection because he's right there. He can't get away from me. And sometimes I watch when he's about to take out his rubbish.
God, it's getting weird, mate. What?
No, it's not that.
Yeah.
So I think starting with just, hey, if you're confused about who do you start with, just do that audit.
Yeah, great.
Audit your life and who do I always bump into?
Yeah. And I love the coffee shop example. That's such a great example of like, well, I got the same one. I got the same one every time. And I think, like I'm reminded of my wife's, when we were first in Australia, my wife worked like a bunch of different jobs. And one of the places she worked was a veterinary surgery. Like it was like a holistic veterinary surgery. So mad. But this lady's husband was British, and so we kind of immediately struck it off, because he had the accent, and then
and you drank tea together. And
that's how it works. And ate roast beef.
Mad at football.
Yeah. What do you call it here? Soccer, right?
Soccer.
Yeah, that's so weird. Soccer. But often because of the place I'm from in the UK, football or /soccer is massive. It's like a religion in itself there.
Legit, yeah.
And so there he hears my accent and just assumes I'm a mad football fan.
Oh, you're not into...
I'm not really massively into football, no.
Okay.
I'm
not judging. No, I'm not judging.
No, I feel like you are.
Yeah.
I feel like you are. I'm a man, I'll show you. Anyway, I've got a kayak. I bought a kayak. Yeah. That's manly.
That is.
And I'll kill anything.
I didn't say you weren't a man. I just said...
maybe I'm oversensitive. Anyway.
So he's into soccer.
Thanks for bringing that back.
Football.
He's into football. And basically it was the World Cup while Laura started this job. And England had got to the World Cup final, which hadn't happened for years and years since I was a kid. And he's like, dude, we should go and see the World Cup final. And it's in, it was actually in the area we're in now, but it was about 40 minutes drive from my house. I'm like, wow. And I'm thinking, but we're in Australia. What time will it be? And it was at 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, no. And already so I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'll be honest, couldn't have thought of anything worse. Waking up at what was 2:30 in the morning
Yeah.
to go and be surrounded by a bunch of other British people drinking beer in the middle of the night, watching a sport I don't like, right? But all of a sudden, I'm like, this guy's the only unsaved guy I currently know.
Right.
And so I thought, this
Just
is an
send it.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Send it, yeah. And so woke up at 2:30, didn't know my own name, like drove to this place, and there was another British guy there, and it was cool, I mean, England lost. I couldn't believe I was furious. God, you could have at least, but no.
There's nothing that forges friendships about being angry about the same
Let's
thing.
be angry about, particularly British people. Let's complain about the same thing.
Yeah, that's right.
And build
Yeah.
a friendship on that. But since then, we've caught up, and I've actually had him in front of me in a coffee shop in tears because he lost someone really close to him, and we've had some really beautiful, deep conversations. But that was just because I was, okay, there's an opportunity. He's unsaved. I love Jesus. Let's just hang out and see where it goes. Did I share the gospel with him while we were watching the match? No, I didn't.
Yeah.
We just had a drink and watched the football.
Yeah.
But since then, I've kind of laid my cards out on the table.
Yeah.
Right. So it was worth it.
And I think that's best done in the context of just a natural friendship, right?
Yeah.
As you get to know someone, you get to know what they value. And I think it just sets the scene, for those things to come out. And what I hear from that as well is like, first of all, who are the natural connections that you have? So it was a natural connection because he was Laura's boss. But then also sometimes we actually have to do the hard work of breaking out of our church connections. I mean, there's nothing wrong. Like, obviously, there's nothing wrong with church connections, but we get involved serving on teams. We get volunteering at church. We, attend church programs maybe midweek. And so suddenly, I know for me, like all of a sudden my week can just be filled up with catching up with friends who I already are connected with in the church.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be really intentional.
For sure.
i.e. 3 a.m.
3 a.m. Oh, do you know what I did last week?
What did you do last week?
I joined an ultimate frisbee team.
You didn't.
True story. Because, mate, it's so good. It's an epic workout, and I'm surrounded by, evidently, when you hear them play, non-Christians. Right? I was like, you're swearing about a frisbee? You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's so good.
Now,
Frisbee's great.
Frisbee is great.
Ultimate frisbee,
Yeah.
I imagine, is better.
It is. It's like playing frisbee, but
better.
More ultimate-y.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so good. It's so good.
That's what it says on the tin.
That's what it says on the tin. All right, we've got one more question. How do you bring up the gospel in casual conversation? It always seems too much.
Great question. How do you bring the gospel up in a casual conversation? Do you know what? Tim Keller, who's one of my favorite authors ever, he's the
Great name.
pastor. It's a great name.
Wise man.
Wise man. Cool.
My name's Tim.
Could you have swallowed that water any louder, by the way? That was epic. I hope they heard that.
Yeah.
I mean, coffee, because we drink coffee and we're hanging out because it's casual. Anyway, he said, so he's the minister of Presbyterian Church in New York, yeah. And he said, you can tell people about Jesus until you're blue in the face, but they won't move until they've watched you live.
Wow.
They won't move until they've watched you live. And one example I can think of, when we were first in Australia, we didn't have a place to live yet. And so we moved like 6 times in 3 months. And there was a family that we lived with for, I think it was 5 or 6 weeks. And she was a single mum with 2 teenage kids. And she had not had a good time of it in terms of relationships and all that kind of stuff, family life growing up. And so in her mind, men, generally speaking, are just horrible creatures. And you hear a story and you're like, I don't blame you. But as we lived with them for that 6 weeks, all we did was be us. That's all we did.
Right.
Now, part of being us was we encouraged each other, and I would be affectionate with my wife and stroke her back that's where it stopped. And encourage her,
Yeah.
and we would talk about things we like to do, and we would have lots of fun. And in the conversation, it was something like, "Oh, what are you guys doing tomorrow? Oh, we're going to church." She's like, "Oh, you go to church? Yeah, go to church." And that's basically where the conversation stopped that day. But then she was looking at us through the filter of, okay, they go to church, they're Christians, and this is how they live life. And then every now and then, when she'd had a couple of glasses of wine and we were just chilling out, she'd just start to ask questions.
Right.
So like, what kind of church? That whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, what do you believe? And eventually, probably 3 or 4 weeks in, Laura and I were able to fully share the gospel with her.
Yeah, wow.
Over a glass of wine. And did she give her life to Jesus that night? No, she didn't. She went to bed, and we probably didn't talk about it again for the rest of that year, because we moved out, we found a place to live. But then randomly, her and her kids just turned up to church.
Oh, no way.
They knew it was our church. We'd invited them, but they didn't come for a year.
Yeah.
But eventually they did, and they haven't stopped coming.
Yeah.
And their kids are part of youth, and it's actually wild to see. Again, it goes back to that seed planting thing. We want the dramatic, when we hear the celebrity pastors online saying, "I was on an aeroplane next to this person and I led them to Christ." And it's like, oh, that never happens to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It can happen, but yeah, what are the other options?
What are the other options? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's just be a Christian in front of people.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, what does that even look like for you? What does a Christian person look like?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
apart from beanies.
What's that?
Apart from beanies.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what I hear from that story is really, it's not hiding the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Because the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. And that's what I hear from that story, is that you weren't pushy with the gospel, but you were very open with the fruit. And that's what she saw, and that's what made her become curious in just a natural way. And so you probably just happened, like that gospel moment, did that just, like when you shared, directly about Jesus, did that just feel it was natural? In those moments, I feel like I'm on staff at a church and I have a job to do on a Sunday. Right.
So for me, I feel the presence of God more during the week in those moments than I do on a Sunday often.
Yeah.
And it's just because it's like, oh my gosh, this is why I'm alive.
Yeah.
This is why I'm
That's
breathing for those moments. And I think in that moment particularly, I had the realization of, we are in a world full of worldviews, religions, all that kind of stuff. But Christianity is the only religion, as it were, that isn't a set of, here's how you get to God. It's just news. I've got some news and it's really good.
Right.
It's actually good news. All of those things that you think you need to do, they were done thousands of years ago by one person, but it's on your credit sheet like that. I know that sounds too good to be true. And I know it doesn't sound fair, and it's not.
Yeah.
That's what's wild about it.
Yeah.
It's not fair. But like, if I was you, I would take it. And I always like to finish with, if it was true, would you want it? And most people then say, well, if it was true, I'd want it.
Wow, that's a
So it's
great
like,
question.
cool. If this was a reality, would you want it?
Wow.
And leading them to a realization of, well, if it was true, obviously I'd want that.
Yeah.
And that's where the conversation can carry on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, today we've been talking about connect and how to just build genuine connections outside of our church circles, so that we can actually have non-Christians to share the gospel with. It's not rocket science, really. It's like, if they're not in your life, you probably can't share Jesus with them. And so we've put that question out onto our socials. How do you build friendships with non-Christians? And we've got some great responses and also some fun ones as well. Nick Isaiah says, seeing them as my neighbor, not projects, and getting to know them through mutual interest. That's a good point. Like, just common ground goes a long way.
Join an ultimate frisbee team. I'm telling you.
Ultimate
do
frisbee.
it.
That's so good. I love that.
Colin Conway. The Conways were a renowned family when I was growing up that you did not go near for fear of being deceased.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so
Well,
Colin, I forgive
he's
you.
come a long way.
He has. He really is. And what Colin Conway said was, by being kind and generous to people.
He's deviating from the family.
I wish you'd known that back
business.
then, mate. Honestly.
Yeah, I think that's again the fruit of the spirit, isn't it?
Yep.
Just lead out with the fruit. Like guest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's not
Seems a
made
very
up at all.
direct person.
Guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go.
He's just like, he or she is just like, it just happens. I don't know. IDK. It just happens.
I didn't even write.
So
I
they're a
don't
natural.
know.
Guest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
Yeah.
is a natural.
Blue Ghost _0.0. That's horrifying. But very creative, and we're glad you're here. Work lol.
He's just like obvious. Work.
No.
He works for the Conway, so he's just like, there's a bunch of people
man.
here I can talk to.
It works for the Conways.
And Lois Glowen, common interests or speaking to a need they have and fulfilling that need. That's great. That reminds me of
it, right.
who said it. I can't remember who said it. People are most teachable at their point of need.
Wow. Was it you? Because you just said
Like it's
that.
like if someone offers you a burger and you've just come out of like a buffet, you're probably going to be like, no.
Yeah.
But if it's like 2:30 in the afternoon and you've forgotten to have lunch and someone's like, here's a burger, you'll be like, okay.
That's great. It
So-
depends what burger you've been offered, though. Like some burgers, you're just like,
True.
I don't care that I'm not hungry.
Yeah.
I'll eat it. Give.
Yeah, that's right.
What about Ada Peary 56? I'm friendly, and I know that they may not want to practice what I practice, but eventually they might.
I like that.
Yeah.
Patience.
Patience.
Yeah. So I guess our question, just in wrapping up, is do you have meaningful connections outside of church?
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's fine. But what steps can you take this week, today, to just start building that?
I think I've made those steps perfectly clear.
I think ultimate frisbee. Imagine after this podcast, just
There's
an
a
influx.
revival.
There's a revival
of ultimate,
ultimate
frisbee.
frisbee.
They're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd encourage you just to look at who are your natural connections, and what are you interested in?
Yeah.
Really, like
Yeah.
Again, ultimate frisbee.
Yeah. There you go.
And just be. I think we need to be intentional as well, because it's so easily to get sucked into the awesome vortex of church, as awesome as it is.
yeah.
But there's depends what kind of church you go to, but there's usually more Christians in church than non-Christians.
Generally,
And so getting
yeah.
outside of those circles is really helpful.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast today. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like this video and also subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can follow us there. You can also rate and review us, I think, on Apple Podcasts, and that just helps this podcast get out to more people. And please interact with our podcast. So I think on YouTube you can jump into the comments, and I would love to hear. And I think the audience, let's just across the community share the groupthink on how we can really foster connections, build just great friendships with people who don't follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And put those in the comments so that we can all share that knowledge. Also, we have an email list where you can get show notes from these podcasts, and if you'd love that, jump on the email list, and also share this with maybe your Connect group or people that you hang out with, and start that conversation within your group of friends, so that you can go on do life on mission together, because it's more fun.
Yeah.
Less boring.
More fun, less boring, and easier.
Life on mission.
And things do get boring.
More fun.
You know what you
less
do, don't
boring.
you?
Ultimate
Ultimate
frisbee.
frisbee.
Ultimate frisbee. Awesome.
I'll stop now.
That's right. Thanks for listening, everyone.